Then they took Jesus from Caiaphas to Pilate's headquarters. It was early in the morning. Then Pilate entered the headquarters again, summoned Jesus, and asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you ask this on your own, or did others tell you about me?" Pilate replied, "I am not a Jew, am I? Your own nation and the chief priests have handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus answered, "My kingdom is not from this world. If my kingdom were from this world, my followers would be fighting to keep me from being handed over to the Jews. But as it is, my kingdom is not from here." Pilate asked him, "So you are a king?" Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. For this I was born, and for this I came into the world, to testify to the truth. Everyone who belongs to the truth listens to my voice." Pilate asked him, "What is truth?" After he had said this, he went out to the Jews again and told them, "I find no case against him. But you have a custom that I release someone for you at the Passover. Do you want me to release for you the King of the Jews?" They shouted in reply, "Not this man, but Barabbas." Now Barabbas was a bandit. Then Pilate took Jesus and had him flogged. And the soldiers wove a crown of thorns and put it on his head, and they dressed him in a purple robe. They kept coming up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and striking him on the face. Pilate went out again and said to them, "Look, I am bringing him out to you to let you know that I find no case against him." So Jesus came out, wearing the crown of thorns and the purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Here is the man." When the chief priests and the police saw him, they shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Pilate said to them, "Take him yourselves and crucify him. I find no case against him." The Jews answered him, "We have a law, and according to that law, he ought to die, because he has claimed to be the Son of God." As I was preparing to preach on this particular passage over the past couple of weeks and had the opportunity to read it several times, I was struck with numerous ironies, both in this preaching situation and in the situation in which Jesus and Pilate find themselves. It's ironic that I would be up there reading, "Crucify him, crucify him," because as a child, I came to these kinds of services every Good Friday from 12 to 3 with my family at our church. And we always reenacted the Passion, and invariably the priest read the part of Jesus, and the congregation read the part of the crowd. Am I right? And I did not like that. I did not like saying, "Crucify him, crucify him." Partly because it hurt me to hear about Jesus being killed, and still does. And partly because I didn't like getting pegged as the bad guy every time. Weren't we the body of Christ, as the priest kept telling us? So how come we didn't say the words of Jesus, and how come he didn't say, "Crucify him, crucify him"? So I hope you're beginning to see the first irony, because now, 40 years later, I am a priest, and I did get to read the words of Jesus, and I also got to read, "Crucify him, crucify him." Isn't it ironic? And doesn't God have a beautiful sense of irony? The other irony is that there I am, sitting in resistance to all of this, but the person who should be in resistance to crucifixion is the very person who's about to be crucified, Jesus, the one who is about to endure this horrible pain and humiliation. And yet he offers no resistance. He really doesn't defend himself. In fact, his lack of defense is so shocking that Pontius Pilate is perplexed. He doesn't know what to make of it. And when Jesus says, "I'm here to testify to the truth," and those who know the truth, listen to my voice, he says, well, what is truth? It's ironic that Pilate, the bad guy in my eyes, at least in my child's eyes, that Pilate is actually the one resisting sentencing Jesus to crucifixion. He's the Roman authority. He doesn't want a rabble-rouser. And yet he keeps saying, I find no case against this man. You do it yourselves. He doesn't want to. And why does he ask Jesus, what is truth, when he knows the truth? At least he knows the truth of this courtroom trial. The truth is Jesus hasn't done anything that has made him deserve crucifixion. And Pilate says it to Jesus and the crowd. And yet, for the sake of political expediency, he's going to throw Jesus under the bus, because that's what the religious authorities want to do. Isn't it better to get rid of this one man so that the rest of us could survive? There is no justice in that courtroom that day, but there's plenty of truth. The funny thing about us and the courtroom trials that we love to see in movies and TV, Law and Order this and Law and Order that, Boston Practice this, LA Law that, is that we yearn for truth and justice to come out of the courtroom. And it doesn't always happen. A friend of mine recently served on a jury trial for 5 weeks, and it was, she said, a complicated murder trial. And it caused her to reflect upon how much time and effort and money we spend on both obscuring, evading, and discovering the truth. We really want truth and justice to come out of our legal system. A perfect example that I love this example is in the movie A Few Good Men. If you remember, it's a military courtroom drama in which the lovely Tom Cruise, in his younger years, is a brash Navy lawyer, and Jack Nicholson is the Marine colonel, and he's not on trial yet, but Tom Cruise has him on the stand, and Tom Cruise wants to get him to admit under oath that he issued a code red in order to beat up a fellow soldier. At one point, Tom Cruise says, "I want the truth." And Jack Nicholson said, "You can't handle the truth." But then moments later, the colonel let slip that in fact he did make the illegal order. And so truth and justice are served that day. But not this day with Jesus. There is truth, but no justice. When I was reflecting upon this passage, I found Pilate's question, "What is truth?" somewhat haunting. You can read it cynically and sarcastically, like, what is truth? You know, there's so many truths in this world. Your truth, my truth, who cares? Let this be done. But you can also read it as the sincere question of a man who's trying to figure out why Jesus says he is testifying to the truth. What is truth? Well, to Jesus, truth is God. He says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." It's very interesting to me that Mahatma Gandhi said also that truth is God. He often taught this. He didn't say that God is truth, but rather that truth is God. And when he began his political struggles first in South Africa, they adopted this term that somebody had coined called satyagraha, which means truth force or truth insistence, insisting upon the truth. What he taught was that the way we resolved conflicts and moved to peace was that we would examine the truths and untruths on every side of the conflict, including our own side of the conflict. Only in that way could we move to a new place. And the way to move to a new place was to leach out the untruths in our own positions, to convince the others of the untruths of their positions, and then to move to that new place. He saw this as an ongoing struggle. It's not like the work ever stopped, because you were constantly seeking truth, and you would discover a new struggle and thus a new need to look for these truths and untruths on every side. He called seeking truth the noblest pursuit in human life and the purpose of his life, because to know truth is to know God, and what he desired most of all was to see the face of God with this knowledge. Now, he exhibited this looking for truths and untruths on every side all the time. So, for example, they were challenging the British Empire and their unjust laws towards the natives of their own land, towards the Indians in India. But at the same time, he was challenging the Indian society to look at the untruths of their caste system and how they treated untouchables. He insisted that before they could move forward with the British, that they had to get rid of their caste system and their way they denigrated the untouchables, the outcasts of their society. He said that the goal was to convince and convert, not to destroy or humiliate the enemy. You simply show them that their way is wrong, that they are untrue, and they will eventually be convinced and change. There's a wonderful example of this in Gandhi's famous trial. He was arrested and tried for sedition in 1922, and it was a British court in India with a British magistrate, and he was charged with sedition. They claimed that his political articles that he published in magazines had stirred up rebellion against the British Empire, and that had caused riots and murders, including of British citizens in India. Like Jesus, Gandhi offered no defense. He pled guilty, but he did something rather more startling than simply saying, "I'm guilty." He said, "You are right. Although I have urged nonviolence and taught nonviolence, it is true that my writings stirred up violence, and for this I am deeply regretful. It's something wrong in my position." And then he went one step further, and he said, "But now, according to your law, British magistrate, you need to sentence me to the severest penalty, according to your law." And here's where it gets very much like the Pontius Pilate story, because the British magistrate basically didn't want to. He said, "I don't know what to do, but your case looks so much like this other guy's case that I'm going to give you the severest penalty of 6 years in prison. But I believe you to be nonviolent, and so I hope that the British government will overturn this and reduce your sentence." Do you see the irony in that? Gandhi taking the law and turning it on the British magistrate and saying, "Do it to me," and the British magistrate saying, "This is wrong." In the end, the British just up and left because they realized they were wrong. Now, Gandhi's associates were very impatient with Gandhi. This was taking decades. And they didn't like Satyagraha because he kept insisting on them examining their own untruths, and it simply took too long. Nonviolence took too long. That's because they had different goals. The goal of his associates was to have political independence, but his goal was truth, just that pure, eternal truth that is God. That's what he was always going for. And this showed this difference in goal when the British left, because the Hindus majority and the Muslim minority in India had not worked out their differences. And so when they got their independence, they split into two nations, the newly formed Pakistan. And there was immediate rioting and murdering throughout India and along the border of India and this new nation of Pakistan. And in another deeply tragic irony, Gandhi was assassinated. Gandhi, a practicing Hindu, was assassinated by a man who called himself a Hindu, a religious fanatic, who was angry at Gandhi for basically colluding with the Muslims, for having Muslim friends, and for working alongside them and negotiating with them. It's easy when these things happen to become cynical. Sometimes I get discouraged. Sometimes I feel despair. And so I read what Gandhi said about despair. He said that in these times when he lost hope, when he felt despair. He pushed against that darkness, and he had faith in God and this search for truth that could be found through what he called the self-suffering and what we might call the self-offering of Satyagraha, of seeking truth through working with others. When I heard about the most recent killings of Christians in Kenya at the Kenyan University, how the Christian students were rounded up and shot, I thought, oh no, here we go again. And there are similar accounts of Christians rounding up Muslims in African villages and killing them. And I thought, oh no, here we go again. And we have come so far in our courtrooms and our legislatures to get rights, basic human rights to love for our LGBT sisters and brothers in this country. And now we have states attempting to make it possible for people to use their religious scruples to discriminate, to humiliate, to exclude people, including our LGBT brothers and sisters. When I first heard this, I was so upset at this step backward. And I thought, well, the thing to do is boycott them. That pizzeria in Indiana that doesn't want to serve pizza to gay couples, close them down. But I think Gandhi would not recommend that. I think Jesus would not recommend that because that's doing harm to them. But what if they did? What if our LGBT sisters and brothers and their straight allies did what Jesus did? What if they went to that pizzeria and they offered them pizza? What if they fed them the way Jesus took a piece of bread and dipped it in olive oil and fed Judas that night? Just turn hatred on its head. What if they washed their windows? What if they washed their feet? I have faith that God can turn around anything, including this. If God can take that little girl from years ago and get her up here to say, crucify him, and preach about it, then God can do anything. So I'll say it again, more willingly, with a little gusto and not joy. Crucify him. Go ahead, crucify him. Because through that cross and that resurrection, we will have our own truths and untruths revealed to us, and we will know God.